November 3rd, 1983, Joe, Todd, an interview with Oliver Meeks. Mr. Meeks, where were you born?
Frederick.
Frederick?
Frederick, Oklahoma.
And when's your birthday?
September 25th, 1913.
1913. Okay. Who was your father?
My father was Oliver Perry Meeks.
And where was he from?
Well, he was from Illinois. And he was one of the earliest pioneers at Frederick. He came there about 1902 or 1903.
Did he say why he came to Frederick?
Yes, he heard that this land was being opened up and that he could get very good land at low prices. And so he settled on he homesteaded a farm southwest of Frederick.
Who was your mother?
I said southwest. I'm in northwest of Frederick.
Okay. Who was your mother?
My mother was Rena Bell Goff. She married my father in 1912.
1912. Was she from Illinois?
No, she was from originally from Montana.
Montana.
Originally from West Virginia.
Yeah. Okay.
She was born in West Virginia.
Okay. What's your earliest childhood memory of Frederick?
A hard question.
Well, I spent all my childhood there, and I can't remember. Well, yeah, I can remember too. I was born in a house at 412 North 11th Street. Of course, I don't remember that. But there was, I do remember the house. We lived there for 4 years, and I remember the house. The house is still standing there yet. And I remember running off from home when I was about 3 and pulling a little wagon, and I saw a bunch of horses rear up. That was about my first memories of Frederick.
What did downtown look like?
Then?
Yeah.
Well, I don't remember, but the earliest remembrance being downtown when I was about 5 or 6 years old. And they had dirt streets, muddy streets, and high false front brick buildings.
Who were some of the prominent people in town?
Well, let's see, there was a Mr. Beard, the banker. I remember him well. And the members of the Tomlinson family, and of course my father, and I remember S.J. Mathis, who was a partner with my father, and John Andy Mathis, and W.S. Drum, and members of the early Presbyterian church there.
Okay. As a little boy, what chores did you do around the house, around the farm?
Well, we lived in Frederick, and I think in 1917, I think in 1917 we moved to a house my father built down on 15th Street. He rented that first house, but this was one he built and owned. And I remember having to help mow the lawn and bring in buckets of coal. And he also had a vacant lot south of us, and I had to help feed the chickens and gather the eggs and so on like that.
Mm-hmm. Do you have any memories of World War I?
Yes, I do.
Tell me what you remember.
I don't remember much about it, except my half-brother went to war. I don't think he ever did any overseas work, but he went to officers' school and was when the war ended, he was Captain J.L. Meeks. And I remember some of the big, just vaguely, some of the big patriotic displays of flags and parades that they had then.
Yeah.
More people were, I believe they were much more patriotic than they are now.
I've heard that.
I believe that.
Yeah. What about Armistice Day?
I remember when that happened.
Tell me about that day.
Well, I was playing outside when all the whistles and bells in Frederick began to ring and clang, and the fire whistle blew, and there was the gin whistle, the oil meal whistle, and all these whistles began to make such a big din, and bells ringing and everything else. My mother began to get alarmed, and she called on the telephone to see what all the racket was about, and they said the war was over, the Armistice is on, and I remember she bawled then. She came outside of the house and just cried. The war was over.
Mm-hmm. How many boys around Frederick went to the war?
I don't rightly remember. I had some distant cousins there in Frederick, and all of them that were old enough. I think there were 4 in the Beard family that went to war. All of them came back. That and my half-brother were all that I knew of.
What about the flu epidemic, 1918?
Well, I remember some talk of it, but it didn't affect us.
Yeah. You all were lucky.
Yeah, I believe we were.
Yeah. You heard about the flu epidemic?
I've heard about it through my mother.
Yeah.
She almost died, she said.
Yeah. Miss Meeks, where are you from?
I'm from Weatherford.
Weatherford.
Mhm.
Oh, well, yeah.
I don't remember that, so I wasn't here
Yeah.
yet.
1920s. Or when did you start to school?
I started school when I was 6 years old, and that was in 1919.
There in Frederick?
Yes, sir.
What was the name of the school?
Well, I went to Whittier School, the South Ward.
Yeah. Who was your favorite teacher?
Well, I can't hardly remember. I think my first grade teacher was a Mrs. McNeely.
That's okay.
But there was a Mrs. Drum. She was real strict, but she could really drill the mathematics into our heads, and especially mine, because I sure needed it. And I believe she was the best teacher, that grade school teacher that I had. I've forgotten her. She was. She was the daughter-in-law of Mr. and Mrs. W.S. Drum.
Yeah. Were there many flappers in Frederick in the 1920s?
Oh yeah, plenty of them.
What? How would you describe a flapper?
Well, a flapper was a the flapper was just a typical teenage girl of the 1920s, especially the late 20s.
Mrs. Meeks, did you agree with that? About
I don't
flapper?
remember
She
much
wore her
about
hair.
it.
Yeah.
She wore her hair real short
Yeah.
and sheared up the back, and probably 2 curls at the sideburns here. And she always wore a short skirt and high heels and hose. They didn't have pantyhose then. I don't think.
Where does the word flapper come from?
I don't know whence originated the word flapper,
I've never heard of it.
I have to look that one up, won't we?
Yeah.
but all of them dressed that way.
Yeah. How did the Depression affect you and your family?
Well, my father was better off financially than most people at that time. But it affected us nevertheless. And when hard times came, where he got so tight that he could make a nickel squeak. Boy, I tell you, spending money was a long time between intervals, I'll tell you.
Was your father a farmer?
Most of his, yes, sir. The early day, now between 1902 and 19 and between 1902 and 1912, where he was actively farming that place out there. In fact, that's all he did from the time he was born until about 1912.
What did he do in 1912?
Well, in about 1910, where he came down with a terrible attack of asthma, and a Dr. Gillis here thought that he had tuberculosis because he was just coughing constantly and wheezing. And he sent him out to New Mexico. And his first wife contracted tuberculosis out there and died out there with tuberculosis. But he never contracted tuberculosis, he never did have it. And there was another old doctor, Dr. Fair, here at Frederick, always maintained that my father did not have tuberculosis. And
You didn't have it.
Yeah.
my mother had a sister who contracted tuberculosis, and she went out there. Everybody went out there to Alamogordo, New Mexico, where the air was clean and dry. And that's where my father met my mother. And my mother took care of my sister, of her sister, until she died with tuberculosis. And they went on back to Montana. I think my father's first wife died about 1910, and my mother's sister died about the same time. And she went on back to Montana, and my father came back to Frederick, and but they remained in contact with each other.
Mm-hmm. So, did your father stop farming then about 1912?
Yes, he stopped actively farming.
What kind of work did he do then?
He ran a real estate and insurance business. The insurance business was quite prosperous, mm-hmm. and he continued it clear up to 1936 when he retired from the insurance business. Mm-hmm. It was known as the Meeks Agency.
Meeks Agency, okay. I understand you did some work for WPA.
Yes, I was appointed an assistant state supervisor with the WPA art project. Mm-hmm. And I was assistant director of the Oklahoma Art Center galleries, which were located above the auditorium in Oklahoma City.
Did you work with Nan Sheets?
Yes, sir. I was working directly under Nan Sheets.
What was she like, Nan Sheets?
Well, she was a very forceful, iron-willed woman, and she was, well, she had to be, in order to keep things going the way she did. Mm-hmm. And she was rather heavyweight physically, and but she had a way of corralling people and making them do the best of their ability to please her for the best benefit of the art center up there.
Why were you appointed assistant director?
Well, I was looking for a job at the time, mm-hmm. and I wrote her and laid out all of my qualifications, and I had a master's degree in art from Oklahoma University at that time, and she was considering some others, but she picked me, and that's how I came to be.
What year was that?
I believe that was January 1941. Mm-hmm. Yes, it was.
Hey, did you take all of your college work at OU?
Yes, sir.
What year did you enter OU?
1935.
1935.
You went to OSU first.
Oh, I did, that's right. I went to OSU in 1931, but just stayed there 1 year.
Yeah. Did you live on campus or off campus?
I lived off campus.
Okay. You live in a boarding house?
Both places, yeah, both places.
What was your major at OSU? What did you study?
Well, I thought I wanted to be an electrical engineer, mm-hmm. but
Don't know why.
Found out mathematics to be a little cantankerous there.
Is that what changed your mind?
Yes, sir, it did.
So you switched to art?
Yes.
How come you chose art?
Well, from 1931, from the latter part, let's see, is from 1932 to January 1935, I took a course in drafting. Pretty thorough course.
Where'd you take this?
I took it at home. It was a correspondence course. And it was a pretty thorough type course. And I didn't have a job then, and a neighbor of mine who I grew up with, named Lloyd N. Gilliland, suggested that I ought to try the art school, and so I decided to try it, and that's...
Who was head of the art school?
Oscar B. Jacobson.
Did you know the five Kiowas?
The what?
The five Kiowa artists that Mr. Jacobson worked with? You know, Mopope, Asa, Akaya. Who were the others? Oh, yeah, it was Tatsok, Mopope, Asa, Akaya, and what are the others? Did you know them?
Now, that's all very familiar to me, and I have seen them at one time or another, but just, you know,
Yeah.
just a bare glimpse of it.
Right. Can you give a good description of Mr. Jacobson?
Yes, he was a very tall, slender person. He was a Swede, and he was about 6'2" or 6'4". He was, and had a small mustache, and he's rather slender build.
What was his personality like?
He was, I think he was a very pleasing person to be around. He had a very good sense of humor, and he was just a very, very nice person to be around.
Could you explain your duties as assistant director of the art program?
Yes. They mainly were to see that the pictures and traveling exhibits were hung in the right places, and mainly to sort of police the galleries and explain the pictures to visitors that came through, and explain the exhibits to the... That was the main duty, was to explain the pictures and exhibits to the visitors that came there.
Yeah. Did you work with the artists directly in the program?
Yeah, several of them.
Mm-hmm. Who are some of the most famous artists that you work with?
Well, I worked with Stephen Donahoe, Bark Ward, Tom Sims, Julius Strupek. I never did see Julius Strupek up there, but I know he was on the WPA art project because he was a sculptor and he did a lot of sculpture down at OU.
How was the program set up, the art program of WPA? Or how was it organized?
I don't remember exactly but originally many of these artists were literally starving. The Great Depression was on then, and this program started up about 1934, I think, and many of these artists were literally starving to death. And they set this program up so that these artists could paint and do their thing, do their work. And their work then became the property of the United States government. See, they could go on and stay in practice and keep working until times got better. And stay in practice, in other words. And all of their work would become the property of the United States government. And they were usually paid about a maximum of $75 a month, which was a whopping good wage at that time. Wow.
How many pieces of art were produced in the program?
Now, I couldn't answer that.
Okay.
But it numbered in the thousands and thousands. And these are still being kept by the government today in Washington, D.C.
I was going to ask if they're still in existence.
Yes, sir. Now, we had a fella last year, I believe it was last November, wasn't it?
Yeah.
That came to Cameron University, and I was invited to come over there, and these people from Cameron University did some research work on government art in Oklahoma. And strangely enough, that was the title of my master's thesis in 1941. And they discovered my master's thesis in the OU library, and they got all excited about it, and they decided to look me up and found me over at Snyder. Boy, it's pouring out there. And so they had quite a party there, and they tried to get all of the artists that did work at that time, but they didn't succeed very much. They finally got Darrell Swineford, who was another one that I forgot to mention back there, along with Jules Strupek.
Yeah.
And they finally got Darrell Swineford, who was in many of my classes at OU, and Leonard Good, who was my old painting instructor at OU, and Bob Shedd, who did a lot of WPA work. He did a lot of murals, and Swineford did wood carvings and murals in wood carving. He was a sculptor. He did both paintings and sculpture, and but most of his big murals were in wood.
Did you have anything to do with the murals painted in like the post office buildings? Because I noticed in a lot of the
Now, I never did paint a mural in a post office building. I did do, in conjunction with Bart Ward, we had a partnership in this. We did 2 murals for the museum at Woolaroc Museum at Bartlesville, near Bartlesville, I say.
You know,
And they're hanging there yet.
which murals are they?
They're the murals of the basket weavers and the anthropological. They're the murals that are with the anthropological display there.
I've seen those, and I've seen your name on them too. There's one at the Historical Society. One of those, a mural like that. How many of those murals did you produce?
We produced 2 of them together.
Oh, I wonder who that one went to.
I never
It
did
was in the
do.
paper,
Yeah.
Don't you know,
Cause there's
I
one at the,
found it in there. I was just looking through a paper and
there's
I
one at the
saw it.
Historical Society now.
I didn't know where it went.
Yeah.
They talked
Is
about it was down
one
in
of them at the
Spiro.
Yeah.
Historical Society?
So I don't know if they went back down there and now they're back to Oklahoma City or
Well, I
what.
think that one is just a Spiro and it's gonna go to the Spiro Mounds, I think. But the basket weavers are still at Woolaroc. Why and how did you do the
The murals?
murals?
The people that we did the murals for, cemented a 4 by 8 foot panel of white linoleum onto a pressed wood backing. It is the thickest pressed wood they could find.
About what, half an inch thick?
Yeah, I think it's every bit of that. And okay, are we ready?
Yeah.
Okay, they cemented this onto the pressed wood backing, and we used wood carving tools and incised a small groove with our design, according to our design, in the linoleum, after which we rubbed oil paint color into the white linoleum. And it was a slow process, and we had to keep rubbing it and rubbing it and rubbing it until the color smoothed out. And that's the way the murals were done.
How long did it take you to do them?
I don't know, both Bart and I I think it took us about 3 weeks of working in spare time to do it. And we'd go down there after 5 o'clock in the afternoon. We were working, and we'd go down there after 5 o'clock and work clear till midnight or after.
Now, did you do the murals at Woolaroc?
No, we did them at OU.
At OU?
Yeah.
Okay.
Now, by that time, I had resigned from the anthropology department, from the art project, and went to work for the anthropology department at OU. Okay. And from the art project, and was working for the anthropology department as a photographer and general artist and so on.
Where did you do the research to do the murals? Spiro and the basket weaver?
Well, I was photographer for the anthropology department, and I took hundreds of pictures of the artifacts that they brought in. A lot of these shell pictures that are being published now, I've recognized this, and my negatives are still over there.
Are you given credit for them?
Yeah, they usually say I've never seen them, but
My sister did.
my sister-in-law and some others have said they have seen photographs on TV that I took.
Now, I understand you were the photographer for the excavation of Spiro Mounds.
Well, I never did go out to the field. I developed the negatives that they brought in. They took the pictures out there and they brought them in. And I developed those pictures and made prints. Also, I took photographs of the artifacts there in the anthropology department.
Where was the department located then? What building?
It was located in the basement of the old law building.
Okay, the old law barn. Who was head of the Anthro department then?
There was the head of the anthropology department was Dr. Park at that time, but he didn't have anything to do with the Spiro project. Dr. Forrest E. Clements was head of the Spiro project, and this was a WPA project. I was paid by the WPA, and so was Clements. Now, Clements was former head of the anthropology department, and he resigned it to take charge of this Spiro project because he felt it was so important. It was a very important archaeological find in Oklahoma at that time.
Now, was this WPA project after the mounds had been looted?
Yes. Well, you know, it takes the government quite a lot of time to get into high gear. And meanwhile, the people in that area had heard that this was going to be made a government project, and this was government property, and so on. And then is when the looting occurred, and they even dynamited the big Spiro Mound. And many of the artifacts were broken up and destroyed when they dynamited it. Oh, I remember it made Clements so mad that he could have eaten nails.
Well, I can't even comprehend anything like that. What was Dr. Clements like? What kind of person was he?
Well, he liked to have a lot of fun. He was a very forceful type of man, and he was kind of small, round-faced man. And the assistant director of the project was a woman named Sarah White, and she was a brilliant anthropologist herself. And Clements later married her.
I'd like to get some more information on the Spiro Mounds, but I don't know what question to ask. Any idea how many artifacts that you photographed from the dig?
I don't have any idea, but it was considerable.
Yeah.
The small artifacts in the studio, I'll call it, were photographed with a Contax camera, 35mm camera. And we photographed just hundreds and hundreds of them. I used up just roll after roll after roll of 36 exposure film. And some of those were in color too.
Now, do the negatives belong to the government or OU?
I believe they belong to the government. I'm not sure. Since this is WPA project.
Yeah, okay. So what Dr. Clements did was mainly just a salvage project at the Spiro Mounds then. He just salvaged what was left, or?
Well, they dug the, I'm sure they dug the big mound off like it should have been, you know, sectionized and all of that. I'm sure they finished it up in regular form, but I'm sure he got mad. They also did other Indian burials burials in different counties too. At that time, I remember photographing them as well. I mean, making prints of it.
How long did you work on the project?
Let me see. I believe I worked there about 9 months. And by that time, World War II started up, and the axe fell about February of 1942, and I got another job somewhere else.
What'd you do then in 42?
I went and fell back on my drafting training, and I got a job with the Austin Company as a tracer. And they were building the big aircraft assembly plant at Oklahoma City. And I stayed on that for about 6 to 8 months, and then just transferred into the Douglas Company.
Yeah. Is that what's Tinker Air Force Base now?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so you're a draftsman and building that building.
Yeah, I was a draftsman and building that building, and that after I transferred into Douglas, where I went right into the production illustration department, and was employed first as a draftsman, and then later as a technical illustrator, and still later as a technical writer.
You ever served in the military during the war?
What do you say?
You ever served in the military during the war?
No, because of these thick glasses. They wouldn't have me.
Do you remember doing any special work for the war effort besides your regular job?
Yes. I taught a class in blueprint reading. And it was at the old Classen High School.
Mrs. Meeks?
That was at the same time I was.
Yeah, right. Mrs. Meeks, did you do any work during the war effort, during the war?
Well, yes, I'd gone to business school at Drawings there, and we girls, there were 3 of us sisters, and we all started working, one at Tinker and 2 at Tinker, and I worked at Douglas, but couldn't take but only, I believe, 2 in a household at Tinker.
That's where I got mixed up with her.
Oh, that's where you all
And,
met.
That's where I got mixed up with her.
What'd you do at Douglas?
Well, I worked in personnel to begin with, and then when we hired everybody, we sent out letters in there. Mine was reference department, to find out what kind of characters we were hiring and if they were, you know, real good Americans or not, good citizens. And we sent out lots of letters, I'll tell you. And then I worked in license engineering. That was where I met him. He was in engineering, and I needed ride to work, so he was the one that come over to me and asked me if he could pick me up to ride to work, you know. And I rode to work with him for, I don't know how long, not too long until we got married.
Yeah.
What year did y'all get married?
1944.
1944.
December 44.
You say you went to Drawings Business School? What year did you go there?
Well, let's see, I went about 7 months, was really all, until I started working at Douglas.
What did you study there at Drawings?
Shorthand and typing and English. And
How's that school organized? I've heard about it. Is it,
well, I don't know. You know, there were about 600 of us going at that time. And I don't know how it is now, you know.
okay, were you from Oklahoma City?
No, I was from Weatherford.
Okay, oh, that's right. Well, did you board in Oklahoma City then, or?
Yes, we stayed. We had an apartment.
Yeah. Where was the school located?
I really can't tell you. I don't know the address, but it was downtown.
Downtown? Who was head of the school?
Well, I can't tell you. I can't remember his name. But he's a really fine man.
Was the school started by a man named Drawn, or?
I don't know. No, I really don't know how long that school had been there either, you know. But I really wasn't there long enough. I should have taken bookkeeping and all, but I really liked, you know, the typing. I'd had that in high school, and the shorthand was just something else. I'll never forget that, you know. I never used it much though. Didn't have an occasion to. But I can still use it now, I believe.
Yep.
I have forgotten. It's just like ham radio with him.
Yeah.
You know, he's a ham radio operator.
How far will a ham radio reach? How far can you?
Yeah, all over the world.
Huh. I'd like some. Did you ever visit the Spiro Mounds?
No, never did.
Never did?
Never did.
Okay, well.
You know, those people, Lisa Ford wrote you there. And she thought you might have some articles from the mounds, but he never did have any.
Yeah. You said you had some photographs at home.
Yes, now these were the post office pictures, weren't they, all the murals? We have a number of those.
Oh.
Now, I found those not long ago, you remember, there's a whole stack of them. And now we do have a few pieces of that broken pottery that they found in those mounds, you know.
We have?
We have a few.
No, we don't.
I think we have one or two.
No.
A picture?
Well, I guess that's all I can think of. Anything else on Spiro?
No. That's all that I can think of. If I've never been to the Spiro Mound, and I couldn't tell you about any of the location of it or anything.
No, they've rebuilt the mounds.
They have?
Yeah, and they're putting that museum out there.
Uh-huh.
And they've reconstructed the mounds and everything.
Yeah, that's what you said.
Yeah, and they're building that museum out there.
I'd like to take a trip over there someday and just.
That's a nice area.
Interesting.
Okay, thank you.